Why is the Navajo Nation so damn big? A history of the USA's largest Native American reservation, so huge it's in a class of its own. Written and read by yours truly, Oakie McDoakie, screw ups and all. On a recent road trip to visit an Arizonan friend, I decided to cut across the Navajo Nation on back roads and avoid the interstate. The 4-plus-hour east to west drive of more than 250 miles nailed something that I vaguely already knew. The Navajo Nation is huge. I mean, most U.S. reservations are pretty damn small, especially back east, more like the size of small towns. At about 27,000 square miles, the Navajo Nation is considerably bigger than even the next largest western reservation, the Uintah and Ouray Reservation in Utah, which is less than 6,900 square miles, about a quarter of the size. For an apples to apples comparison, the Navajo Nation is about the same size as the island of Ireland, larger than 10 U.S. states. So, how did it get this way? The U.S. government has not historically been generous when establishing reservations, especially in terms of land size. How did the Navajo end up with so much territory? Well, it was a mix of ecology, timing, persistence, political leadership, and federal pragmatism. First off, the Navajo Nation did not start out anywhere near its current size. After the Navajo surrendered to Kit Carson in 1864, they were marched east from their traditional homelands in Arizona and New Mexico to Bosque Redondo in eastern New Mexico, the infamous Long Walk. Nearly 8,500 to 10,000 Navajo were settled along the Pecos River. The U.S. government's idea was to turn them into farmers and Christians while also pacifying the region for American expansion. The whole thing was a disaster, which the government eventually admitted. It wasn't that the Navajo didn't try. The whole project was doomed from the beginning. There was no way that amount of land was going to support that many people with 19th century farming technology unless it was nearly perfect farmland, something like the Nile River Delta, which eastern New Mexico definitely is not. In my van life days, I camped at Bosque Redondo Memorial Park, which sits inside the area of the old reservation. Even to a non-farmer, it's obviously not great land. It's mainly dry grassland, better suited to ranching, which is still the main thing happening out there today. There is some farming, but that's with modern irrigation, modern crop strains, fertilizers, and pesticides. The government did provide minimal food support plus agricultural tools and livestock, but between the poor quality land, brackish water, insect infestations, crop failures, disease, and raids, thousands of Navajo died. By 1868, the government realized the whole thing was failing. The remaining Navajo were ready to revolt and return home. They probably felt they had little choice. They were damned if they stayed and damned if they left. The government sent peace commissioners to negotiate a new settlement. The delegation included General W.T. Sherman. Yes, that General Sherman, the Civil War general famous for the March to the Sea from Atlanta to Savannah. Not exactly a cuddly bear. Yet even Sherman was horrified by conditions at Bosque Redondo, comparing it to Andersonville, one of the most notorious prison camps in American history. Yup, things were that bad. A new treaty was signed. The Navajo were granted about 5,000 square miles of their original homeland and allowed to return. But 5,000 square miles was only about a fifth of what they have today. It was just the beginning. Over the next several decades, the reservation kept growing, again and again. Executive orders, congressional acts, boundary adjustments. The map almost looks like tree rings spreading outward from a central core. Why? Well, partly because the Navajos simply kept using land outside the official boundaries. They grazed sheep there, settled there, returned to old homelands there. Navajo leaders also repeatedly negotiated for additional territory and recognition of lands already in use. The federal government often ended up legalizing realities already happening on the ground. See, the U.S. government originally imagined Native Americans being small farmers in the Eastern American mold. That was the 19th century American ideal. Fenced farms, neat fields, private property, church on Sunday, and eventually becoming ordinary Americans. The problem was that much of the Navajo homeland is not Iowa. Drive through the nation today and it's obvious. The land is beautiful, but much of it is dry, rocky, windswept high desert, and mesa country. There are pockets of farming in valleys and near water, but much of the region is better suited to ranching. The Navajo already understood this. Their traditional economy mixed sheep and goat herding with smaller scale farming, hunting, gathering, and trade. They understood what works in that country. So even while federal policy kept talking about farming, the real Navajo economy increasingly evolved around livestock. Sheep herding spread rapidly after the 1868 treaty because it worked. Sheep could survive sparse forage spread over enormous distances. But that kind of economy requires land, lots of it. In parts of the Navajo Nation, a single sheep may require 5 or 6 acres of grazing land. Ironically, the harshness of the landscape may have helped preserve Navajo territory. White people mostly didn't want the land. It wasn't attractive for farming. Had the territory been as lush as central Illinois, the Navajo might have been squeezed into a much smaller reservation. Another important factor was timing. By the late 1800s, the reservation system was already well established, and federal officials increasingly realized that allowing the Navajo a large homeland was cheaper and easier than constant military conflict. The Navajo population also rebounded after Bosque Redondo, helping maintain pressure for expansion. But another huge reason the Navajo Nation stayed so large was that it mostly avoided the allotment policies that shattered many other reservations. Under the Dawes Act of 1887, tribal lands across the United States were often broken into individual private parcels with surplus land open to white settlement. Millions of acres of native land were lost that way. The Navajo largely escaped that process, allowing the nation to remain one large connected territory instead of being chopped apart. That does not mean that the federal government suddenly went soft. It found plenty of other ways to oppress the Navajo. Federal authorities still pushed assimilation aggressively through boarding schools, missionaries, land policies, and later livestock reduction programs. In the 1930s, federal officials, partly reacting to real overgrazing concerns and partly influenced by broader conservation fears during the Dust Bowl era, dramatically reduced Navajo sheep herds in what many Navajos still remember as a devastating and heavy-handed policy. The reductions damaged both the economy and traditional ways of life. Then, synthetic fibers undercut wool markets in the 1950s and 60s, making many traditional sheep operations financially unsustainable. And yet, despite all this, the Navajo Nation endured and expanded. In 1868, there were perhaps 8,000 to 10,000 Navajo alive, survivors of Bosque Redondo plus those who were never captured. Today, the Navajo population is roughly 400,000, with somewhat less than half living within the Navajo Nation itself. The Navajo language, Diné Bezad, also survives far more strongly than many Native American languages, though fluency has declined significantly among younger generations and remains a major concern within the nation. Size alone, of course, has never guaranteed prosperity in such a harsh landscape. The nation has petroleum and mining, but those industries provide only so many jobs. Much of the land isn't well suited to modern agriculture, and there is relatively little industry. Like many rural parts of America today, much of the economy revolves around government jobs and transfer payments. Yet, despite those challenges, the Navajo Nation still governs itself to a surprising degree. It manages its own government operations, tribal courts, law enforcement, and taxation, though federal and state governments still retain authority in certain areas. It's a nation within a nation, part of the United States, yet sovereign in many ways. The Navajo Nation is not only the largest reservation in the United States, but something closer to a true territorial homeland. Drive across it and you'll feel it in your bones. This is not a tiny enclave tucked off the highway. It is an enormous cultural region spread across 3 states, typically American in many ways, yet uniquely Navajo somehow. The tribe officially began calling itself the Navajo Nation on April 15th, 1969. Given its scale, I'd say the name is earned. If you like this, you can tip me on ko-fi.com/Oakie McDoakie or follow me on Substack in the socials. Just go to oakiemcdoakie.com. Until next time, don't let the bastards wear you down.